The ghostly visitor. Once upon a time, in a small town shrouded in the mists of time, there stood an old house. Its crumbling facade told a tale of years gone by, and its darkened windows seemed to hide secrets long forgotten. It was a house like no other, a place where the whispers of the past danced with the shadows of the present. One crisp autumn day, a young couple named Lucy and Michael decided to make this house their home. Eager to embrace the charm of an older era, they moved in with wide smiles and hopeful hearts. Little did they know that they were not alone in their newfound abode. The first few nights were uneventful, filled with the creaks and groans of an old house settling into the silence. Lucy and Michael held each other close as they lay in their cozy bedroom, wrapped in the soft embrace of the moonlight that filtered through the tattered curtains. Then, on the fourth night, it happened. A whisper, soft and barely audible, wafted through the room. Lucy stirred in her sleep, thinking it was a dream, but the whisper persisted. It was the kind of whisper that sends shivers down your spine, an eerie sound that defied explanation. "Michael," she said, nudging her husband awake. "Did you hear that?" Michael rubbed his eyes and listened intently. The room was silent now, and he chuckled softly. "It's just an old house, Lucy. Houses make all sorts of noises." Lucy tried to dismiss it as well and snuggled closer to him, but sleep eluded her. As the minutes ticked by, she felt a growing unease in the pit of her stomach. Then, as if in response to her fear, a small ceramic figurine sitting on their dresser suddenly toppled over. The crash shattered the silence, and both of them bolted upright, their hearts pounding in their chests. Michael jumped out of bed and turned on the light. There, amidst the shards of porcelain, they saw something that chilled them to their core. A message had been written in the dust on the dresser's surface. "Get out." Lucy's hands trembled as she pointed at the haunting message. "Michael, we're not alone in this house." Michael could hardly believe his eyes. He knew there had to be an explanation, some logical reason for this bizarre occurrence, but he couldn't find one. Fear crept into his voice as he said, "We should leave." But as they rushed to gather their things, the door slammed shut with a deafening bang, sealing them inside the room. Lucy screamed, and Michael tried in vain to open the door, but it refused to budge. The room was ice cold, and the air seemed to thicken with an ominous presence. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, echoed outside the door. Each step seemed to draw nearer, and terror gripped their hearts as they realized they were not alone in that room, nor were they alone in that house. Lucy and Michael huddled together, their breath visible in the frigid air of the sealed room. The ominous footsteps outside the door drew closer, like the slow approach of a ghostly specter. They exchanged terrified glances, their minds racing to comprehend the inexplicable. Just when it seemed their fear might consume them, the footsteps abruptly ceased. The room was plunged into a silence so profound that it felt like a vacuum, sucking the very breath from their lungs. With trembling hands, Michael tried the doorknob once more. This time, it yielded, and the door creaked open. They stepped cautiously into the dimly lit hallway, their eyes darting in all directions, searching for any sign of what had just transpired. The house, once welcoming in its antiquity, now felt like a malevolent entity. Shadows danced along the walls, and the air seemed heavy with unseen eyes watching their every move. Lucy whispered, her voice trembling, "We need to figure out what's going on, Michael." Michael nodded, his resolve outweighing his fear. "Agreed. But first, let's see if there's anyone else in this house with us. Maybe it's just a prank or a squatter." They began to explore room by room, their footsteps echoing through the eerily quiet house. Each room seemed to hold its own secrets, and their journey led them deeper into the enigma of their new home. In the old study, they discovered a dusty photo album filled with pictures of a family from a bygone era. The family appeared happy, their smiles captured in faded sepia tones, but there was something haunting about their eyes. As they flipped through the pages, Lucy and Michael couldn't shake the feeling that the family had never truly left. Continuing their search, they entered the attic. It was a place where time had seemingly stood still. Amongst the cobwebs and forgotten relics, they found an old diary. Its pages were yellowed with age, and the ink had faded, but they managed to decipher some of the entries. One entry caught their attention. "The whispers grow louder every night. I hear them in the walls, in the floors. They torment me, urging me to do terrible things. I cannot escape their voices. They are driving me to madness." The diary belonged to a woman named Eleanor, who had lived in the house many years ago. Her words painted a disturbing picture of a woman trapped in a nightmarish existence. As Lucy and Michael descended from the attic, they were suddenly gripped by the sensation of being watched. They turned to see a shadowy figure at the end of the hallway, its form flickering like a wisp of smoke. "Who are you?" Michael demanded, his voice quivering. The figure remained silent, its eyes fixed on them with an otherworldly intensity. It began to move closer, its steps eerily echoing the ones they had heard before. With a surge of fear, Lucy and Michael fled down the stairs, their hearts pounding in their chests. They had to escape this house, but the front door was jammed shut. It was as if the house itself refused to let them leave. The figure drew nearer, and its spectral presence seemed to fill the entire hallway. It was then that Lucy and Michael understood the truth. They were not alone, and they were not dealing with a mere prankster or squatter. The house held a dark secret, a presence that had lingered for generations, and it was determined to keep its secrets hidden, no matter the cost. Trapped within the confines of the haunted house, Lucy and Michael's fear continued to mount. The shadowy figure drew closer, its presence suffocating and malevolent. The very walls seemed to conspire against them, whispering secrets and harboring ancient grudges. With trembling hands, they retreated into the living room, desperately searching for a way out. The windows were barred with heavy wooden shutters, and there was no way to open them. They were prisoners in a house that had become a nightmarish labyrinth. "Lucy," Michael said, his voice strained with terror, "we have to find a way to break the curse or whatever it is that's keeping us here." Lucy nodded, her eyes darting around the room, looking for any clue that might provide an escape. As she scanned the bookshelves lining the walls, her gaze fell upon an old, weathered tome with a tattered cover. It seemed out of place amidst the other books, and her curiosity led her to pick it up. The book was filled with cryptic symbols and diagrams, written in a language neither of them recognized. It appeared to be some sort of occult grimoire, filled with instructions for rituals and incantations. "This book," Lucy said, her voice trembling, "might hold the key to understanding what's happening here." Michael approached, peering over her shoulder at the strange text. "Do you think it can help us break whatever curse is keeping us here?" Lucy hesitated, but desperation overcame her reservations. "We don't have many options. We have to try." With the grimoire in hand, they ventured further into the house, following the cryptic instructions within its pages. The rituals were both eerie and unsettling, involving candles, salt circles, and incantations in a language that seemed to echo through the very walls of the house. As they performed the rituals, strange phenomena began to occur. The air grew thick with an otherworldly presence, and the whispering voices intensified. Shadows danced along the walls, and the temperature plummeted to bone-chilling levels. They knew they were getting closer to the truth, closer to the heart of the house's malevolence, but they also knew that they were not alone in their efforts. The shadowy figure, the ghostly presence that had haunted them from the moment they arrived, watched their every move. One night, as they performed a particularly complex ritual in the basement, they heard the figure's eerie whisper. It echoed through the darkness, chilling them to their core. "Leave," it hissed, a voice laced with bitterness and anger. "You cannot banish me. This house is mine." Lucy and Michael refused to be cowed by the malevolent entity. With renewed determination, they pressed on, seeking answers that would release them from the house's clutches. As they delved deeper into the grimoire's instructions, they uncovered a ritual that promised to reveal the truth behind the haunting. It required them to venture into the darkest corners of the house, confronting the entity head-on. With the ritual prepared, they steeled themselves for the final confrontation. The house seemed to groan in protest, its very structure resisting their efforts to banish the ghostly presence. As they stood in the heart of the haunted house, surrounded by flickering candles and salt circles, the shadowy figure materialized before them. Its form was a swirling mass of darkness, its eyes filled with centuries of pain and rage. "Who are you?" Lucy demanded, her voice steady despite the terror that gripped her. The figure's voice resonated through the room, a chilling echo of the past. "I am Eleanor, trapped in this wretched place for eternity. You cannot banish me, for I am bound to this house." Lucy and Michael stood face to face with Eleanor, the restless spirit bound to the old house. Her voice was a haunting echo of pain and torment, her presence palpable and suffocating. "Why are you trapped here, Eleanor?" Michael asked, his voice filled with sympathy. Eleanor's form wavered, and she began to speak, her words carrying the weight of centuries. "I was accused of a terrible crime, one I did not commit. They blamed me for the disappearance of my own children, but I loved them more than life itself. I was driven to madness by the whispers in this house, by the malevolent force that sought to destroy me." Tears welled in Lucy's eyes as she listened to Eleanor's tragic tale. "We want to help you, Eleanor. We want to free you from this torment." Eleanor's eyes, once filled with anger, softened. "You are brave to face me, to confront the darkness that lurks here. If you truly wish to help, you must perform a ritual to break the curse that binds me to this place." The grimoire provided the instructions for the ritual. It involved a series of incantations, offerings, and a final plea for forgiveness. With the guidance of Eleanor, Lucy and Michael began the ritual, their voices trembling as they spoke the ancient words. As they reached the climax of the incantation, the house seemed to tremble, and a powerful wind howled through the room. Shadows writhed and danced, and a blinding light erupted from Eleanor, enveloping her in a radiant glow. Her form contorted and twisted, and then, with a resounding burst, she vanished. The oppressive atmosphere that had plagued the house lifted, and the temperature returned to normal. Lucy and Michael stood in awe, the weight of the house's malevolence finally lifted from their shoulders. "We did it," Lucy whispered, tears of relief streaming down her cheeks. Michael nodded, a sense of peace settling over them. "Eleanor can finally find the rest she deserves." With Eleanor's spirit released, the old house felt different. The air was lighter, and the once creaking floors seemed to sigh in relief. Lucy and Michael realized that they could finally leave without fear of being trapped. As they packed their belongings, they couldn't help but feel a twinge of sadness. They had confronted the darkness, and in doing so, they had helped a tormented soul find peace. The house, once a place of nightmares, now held a bittersweet place in their hearts. On the day they left, they looked back at the old house one last time. It stood there, silent and enigmatic, a monument to the past. They had faced their fears and uncovered its secrets, and now they could move forward, forever changed by their encounter with the ghostly visitor. As they drove away, they couldn't help but wonder if the house would ever find peace, if the darkness that had plagued it for centuries would finally dissipate. One thing was certain. They had left behind a legacy of courage and compassion, a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit in the face of the unknown. The Haunted Doll. In a quiet, picturesque town nestled between rolling hills, there stood an old antique shop. Its dusty windows displayed an assortment of curious items from a bygone era, but one object in particular caught the eye of anyone who passed by. A vintage doll with glassy eyes that seemed to follow you wherever you went. The doll was a relic of the past, its porcelain skin smooth but faded with time. Its once vibrant red hair now hung in tangled disarray, and its frilly dress had yellowed with age. Despite its worn appearance, the doll possessed an eerie allure that drew people in. One rainy afternoon, Emily, a young woman with a fascination for the macabre, stepped into the antique shop. Her eyes immediately fell upon the haunted doll, and she couldn't resist its haunting gaze. The shop's owner, Mr. Thornton, noticed her interest and approached with a knowing smile. "Ah, I see you've taken an interest in my prized possession," Mr. Thornton said, his voice low and conspiratorial. "That doll has a history, you know. A dark history." Emily was intrigued. "Tell me more." Mr. Thornton's eyes gleamed with excitement as he began to weave the tale of the haunted doll. It had once belonged to a young girl named Eliza, who had received it as a gift on her 5th birthday. Eliza adored the doll and named it Clara. They were inseparable, and Clara became her confidant, her closest friend. But as Eliza grew older, strange things began to happen. She would wake in the middle of the night to find Clara sitting at the foot of her bed, staring at her with those glassy, unblinking eyes. Objects in the house would move on their own, and Eliza heard whispers in the darkness that chilled her to the bone. Terrified, Eliza confided in her parents, who dismissed her fears as childish imagination. But the hauntings continued, and Eliza's health deteriorated. She grew pale and frail, her once bright eyes dulled with fear. One fateful night, Eliza's parents awoke to screams coming from her room. They rushed in to find her convulsing on the floor, her eyes rolled back into her head. Clara, the haunted doll, lay beside her, a malevolent aura emanating from its porcelain form. Eliza's parents summoned a local priest to perform an exorcism on the doll, but it was too late. Eliza had been consumed by the malevolent spirit that inhabited Clara. The priest sealed the doll in a wooden chest and buried it deep in the forest, hoping to rid the world of its evil influence. Years passed, and the doll remained hidden, its dark history all but forgotten. That is, until Mr. Thornton stumbled upon it during an excavation in the forest. He brought it back to his antique shop, unaware of the horrors it concealed. As Mr. Thornton finished his tale, Emily felt a shiver run down her spine. The haunted doll, with its tragic history and malevolent spirit, called out to her like a siren song. She knew she had to possess it, to uncover the truth behind the chilling legend. "I'll take the doll," Emily said, her voice filled with determination. Mr. Thornton hesitated for a moment, his eyes filled with concern. "Are you sure, my dear? This doll is not to be taken lightly. It has a way of attaching itself to its owners." Emily nodded, undeterred. "I understand the risks. I need to know if the legend is true." With a sense of foreboding, Mr. Thornton wrapped the haunted doll in an old tattered blanket and handed it to Emily. As she left the antique shop, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had just stepped into a world of darkness and mystery, a world where the line between the living and the dead was blurred. Emily had no idea what lay ahead, but she was determined to uncover the secrets of the haunted doll, no matter the cost. As Emily carried the haunted doll back to her small, dimly lit apartment, she couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The doll, wrapped in its tattered blanket, seemed to radiate an unnatural chill. Its glassy eyes bore into her soul, and Emily couldn't shake the feeling that she had invited something malevolent into her home. Setting the doll on a dusty shelf, Emily began her investigation. She delved into the doll's history, researching Eliza's tragic story and the priest's attempt to exorcise the malevolent spirit. The more she learned, the more convinced she became that the doll was more than just a cursed relic. It was a vessel for a vengeful entity. As days turned into weeks, Emily's fascination with the haunted doll grew. She became obsessed with uncovering the truth behind its dark past, and she spent hours talking to it as if it could reveal its secrets. But the doll remained silent, its glassy eyes fixed on her with an unsettling intensity. Strange occurrences began to plague Emily's apartment. Objects moved on their own, and whispers echoed through the shadows. Emily's once restful nights turned into sleepless torment as she heard the soft, eerie laughter of a child and the sound of porcelain hands tapping on her bedroom door. One night, as Emily lay in bed, paralyzed by fear, she saw the doll's silhouette in the moonlight. It had moved from its shelf and was now perched at the edge of her bed, its eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. It reached out with porcelain fingers, and Emily felt an icy grip close around her throat. Panicking, she gasped for air, struggling to free herself from the doll's malevolent grasp. With all her strength, She managed to push the doll away, and it tumbled to the floor, its eyes still fixed on her. Terrified and gasping for breath, Emily knew she couldn't keep the haunted doll any longer. It was a cursed relic, a harbinger of darkness that threatened to consume her. But how could she rid herself of it? Desperate for answers, Emily sought the help of a paranormal investigator named Dr. Samuel Green. She recounted the doll's eerie history and the disturbing events that had unfolded since she brought it into her home. Dr. Green was a seasoned investigator of the supernatural, and he had encountered many malevolent entities in his career. He agreed to examine the haunted doll and, if necessary, perform a ritual to banish the vengeful spirit. As Dr. Green examined the doll, his face grew solemn. He could sense the malevolent presence that clung to it, like a shadow waiting to strike. He explained to Emily that the doll had become a vessel for a restless spirit, one that sought to torment the living. "The spirit is trapped within the doll," Dr. Green said, his voice grave. "It yearns to escape, to find a new host. It latches onto those who show an interest in it, drawing them into its web of darkness." Emily's heart sank as she realized the truth. She had unwittingly become a target of the doll's malevolence. She knew she had to act quickly to break the curse and free herself from its grip. Dr. Green performed a complex exorcism ritual, invoking ancient incantations and prayers to banish the malevolent spirit from the doll. The room filled with an eerie, oppressive energy as the ritual reached its climax. With a final, resounding incantation, the doll's glassy eyes dimmed and its porcelain form shuddered. Emily watched in awe as the malevolent spirit was expelled from the doll, dissipating into the ether. As the ritual concluded, a profound sense of relief washed over Emily. She knew that the curse had been broken, and the haunted doll was no longer a threat. With gratitude, Emily thanked Dr. Green for his help and watched as he left, taking the cursed relic with him. She knew that the doll would now be sealed away, far from the living, forever separated from the world of the living. As Emily reflected on her harrowing ordeal, she couldn't help but feel a newfound appreciation for the fragility of the barrier between the living and the dead. She had stared into the abyss of the supernatural and emerged forever changed. The ghostly hitchhiker. It was a moonless night, and the desolate road stretched out before Mark like a ribbon of darkness. He had been driving for hours, the rhythmic hum of the engine lulling him into a trance-like state. The only sound was the occasional patter of rain on the windshield. As Mark navigated the winding road, he couldn't help but feel a growing sense of unease. The forest on either side of the road seemed to close in on him, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the faint hum of his car's tires on the wet pavement. Suddenly, a figure appeared on the side of the road, illuminated by the dim glow of his headlights. It was a young woman, her clothes drenched from the rain. Her long, dark hair clung to her face, obscuring her features. Mark slowed the car, his heart pounding in his chest. He couldn't leave a stranded traveler out in the cold, especially on a night like this. He rolled down the window and called out, "Do you need a ride?" The woman turned toward him, her eyes piercing through the darkness. She nodded, her expression unreadable, and climbed into the car without a word. The interior of the car was warm and dry, a welcome relief from the chill outside. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice filled with a strange melancholy. Mark couldn't help but notice that she seemed off. Her pale skin had an ethereal quality, and her eyes held a haunted sadness that sent a shiver down his spine. Still, he pushed aside his unease and focused on the road ahead. As they continued down the desolate road, Mark tried to strike up a conversation with his passenger. "So, where are you headed?" The woman hesitated for a moment before replying, "I'm heading to the old cemetery up ahead." Mark's grip on the steering wheel tightened. The old cemetery was rumored to be haunted, a place where restless spirits roamed the grounds at night. He couldn't understand why anyone would want to go there, especially at this hour. "Why are you going there?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. The woman turned to him, her eyes locking onto his with an unsettling intensity. "I have unfinished business, and I need to find closure." Mark couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to her story than she was letting on. He drove in silence, the weight of her words hanging heavy in the air. As they approached the old cemetery, the atmosphere grew even more eerie. The trees loomed like silent sentinels, and the tombstones cast long shadows in the moonless night. Mark pulled up to the entrance of the cemetery, unsure of what to do next. The woman opened the car door and stepped out, her gaze fixed on the darkened graveyard. "Thank you for the ride," she said softly. "Wait," Mark called out, his concern for her safety outweighing his fear of the cemetery. "Are you sure you'll be okay out here alone?" She turned to him, her eyes filled with an enigmatic sadness. "I won't be alone. I have someone I need to meet." With that, she disappeared into the darkness of the cemetery, leaving Mark alone in the car, his heart racing with a mixture of fear and curiosity. As he drove away from the old cemetery, he couldn't help but wonder about the mysterious woman and the eerie destination she had chosen. Little did he know that his encounter with the ghostly hitchhiker was far from over, and that the road ahead would lead him deeper into the realm of the supernatural. Mark couldn't shake the feeling of unease as he continued driving down the dark and winding road, leaving the old cemetery behind. The encounter with the mysterious woman had left him with a sense of foreboding, as if he had ventured into a world where the line between the living and the dead had blurred. The rain continued to fall, the sound of it drumming on the roof of his car creating a haunting backdrop to his thoughts. He replayed the woman's words in his mind, wondering what could have driven her to the old cemetery at this late hour. Hours passed, and the road seemed to stretch on endlessly. Mark's fatigue began to weigh on him, and the rain showed no sign of letting up. He knew he needed to find a place to rest for the night, but there were no signs of civilization in sight. Just when he was about to resign himself to the idea of spending the night in his car, he spotted a dimly lit sign in the distance. It read, "Hickory Inn, rooms available." Relief washed over him as he steered his car toward the inn. The Hickory Inn was a charming but weathered establishment, its neon sign flickering in the rain-soaked night. Mark entered the lobby, where a tired-looking woman behind the front desk greeted him. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice devoid of enthusiasm. "I'd like to get a room for the night," Mark replied, his exhaustion evident in his voice. The woman handed him a rusty old key. "Room 6, upstairs on the left. Payment is due in the morning." Mark nodded his thanks and made his way to his room. It was a small and dimly lit space, but it offered a welcome respite from the rain-soaked darkness outside. As he settled into the creaky bed, Mark couldn't help but wonder about the mysterious woman he had picked up earlier. What was her connection to the old cemetery? And why had she needed to go there so urgently? The questions gnawed at him, keeping him awake long into the night. Around midnight, Mark was awakened by a soft, plaintive sound coming from outside his window. It was the sound of a woman crying, her sobs filled with sorrow and despair. He sat up in bed, his heart pounding with a growing sense of dread. He knew he couldn't ignore the crease. With a sense of trepidation, he got out of bed, grabbed a flashlight, and ventured out into the rain-soaked night. The crying led him to the old cemetery, the very place where he had dropped off the mysterious woman earlier that evening. The rain had intensified, casting a ghostly pallor over the tombstones. There, in the pale glow of his flashlight, Mark saw her, the same woman he had given a ride to. She was standing beside a weathered tombstone, her dark hair clinging to her face, her eyes filled with tears. "Are you okay?" Mark called out to her. She turned to him, her expression one of anguish. "I can't find him. I've been searching for so long." Mark approached cautiously, his flashlight illuminating the tombstone. It bore a name, Eleanor Sinclair, accompanied by a date of birth and a date of death, both from more than a century ago. "Who are you looking for?" he asked. The woman's voice quivered as she replied, "My son. He was taken from me, and I've been searching for him ever since. I can't rest until I find him." Mark felt a chill run down his spine as he realized the truth. The woman he had given a ride to was not just a mysterious hitchhiker, but a restless spirit trapped in an eternal search for her lost child. As the rain continued to fall and the cries of the ghostly hitchhiker echoed through the old cemetery, Mark knew he had become entangled in a supernatural mystery far beyond his understanding. The road ahead promised to lead him deeper into the realm of the unknown, where the living and the dead were forever intertwined. Mark stood in the rain-soaked cemetery, his flashlight's beam casting eerie shadows among the tombstones. The ghostly hitchhiker, with her eyes filled with tears, continued to search for her long-lost son. "What happened to your son?" Mark asked, his voice trembling in the damp night air. The ghostly woman, her form translucent in the dim light, recounted her tragic tale. "My son, Benjamin, was taken from me when he was just a child. We were traveling on this very road, and our carriage overturned in a terrible accident. When I awoke, he was gone, as if he had vanished into thin air." Mark felt a deep sadness welling up within him as he listened to the ghostly mother's story. It was a tale of loss and despair that had spanned more than a century, and the pain in her voice was palpable. "I've been searching for him ever since," she continued, her voice filled with anguish. "I cannot rest until I find him and reunite with my beloved son." Mark realized that he had stumbled into a supernatural mystery that defied all rational explanation. He had encountered a restless spirit, bound to this world by an unbreakable bond of maternal love. "I want to help you find your son," Mark said, his compassion overriding his fear. "But how can we do that? It's been so long." The ghostly hitchhiker turned to him, her eyes gleaming with hope. "There is a way. The answers lie within the old Sinclair mansion, not far from here. It was once our home, and it holds the key to uncovering the truth." With the ghostly woman leading the way, Mark followed her through the rain-soaked woods until they reached the dilapidated Sinclair mansion. The grandeur of the past had faded, and the mansion stood as a decaying relic of another era. The ghostly hitchhiker led Mark through the mansion's darkened halls, her spectral form illuminating the way. As they explored the abandoned rooms, they discovered a hidden chamber concealed behind a bookshelf. Inside, they found a collection of old journals and letters, each chronicling the Sinclair family's history. Among the pages of the journals, they found clues that pointed to a hidden room within the mansion, a room where secrets were buried. The ghostly mother's eyes filled with determination as she led Mark to the hidden room's entrance. With trembling hands, Mark pushed open the door, revealing a chamber that had remained untouched for over a century. Within, they found a collection of faded photographs and a small, dusty toy, the very toy that had once belonged to Benjamin. The ghostly hitchhiker reached out to touch the toy, her form flickering as if she were becoming more ethereal with each passing moment. "My son," she whispered, her voice filled with a mixture of joy and sorrow. As she touched the toy, a soft, otherworldly light enveloped the room. Mark watched in awe as the spirit of Benjamin, a young boy with tear-filled eyes, materialized before them. The mother and son were reunited at last, their ethereal forms embracing in a tender and bittersweet moment. With a final heart-wrenching farewell, the mother and son disappeared into the light, leaving behind a sense of peace that filled the old mansion. Mark knew that their love had transcended time and death, and that they had finally found the closure they had sought for so long. As Mark left the Sinclair mansion, he couldn't help but feel a sense of awe and wonder at the power of a mother's love, a love that had defied death itself. He had witnessed a supernatural mystery that would stay with him forever, a reminder that the world held mysteries beyond the realm of the living. The Haunted Hotel. The historic Marlowe Hotel stood on the outskirts of a picturesque town, its grand facade a testament to a bygone era. It was a place known not only for its elegant charm, but also for its chilling reputation as one of the most haunted hotels in the region. On a moonless night, the Johnson family, consisting of parents Sarah and David and their two young children, Emily and Daniel, arrived at the Marlowe Hotel. They had heard tales of its ghostly inhabitants, but dismissed them as mere legends. As they entered the lobby, a sense of unease settled over Sarah. The ornate chandeliers cast eerie shadows on the crimson wallpaper, and the air seemed to carry whispers from the past. She brushed aside her apprehensions, not wanting to alarm her family. The hotel's concierge, a stoic man named Mr. Turner, greeted them with a curt nod. "Welcome to the Marlowe Hotel. I trust you'll find your stay to your satisfaction." Despite Mr. Turner's aloof demeanor, the Johnsons checked in and made their way to their rooms on the 3rd floor. The hallways were dimly lit, and the faded wallpaper bore witness to decades of history. That night, as the Johnsons settled into their rooms, they couldn't help but feel a growing sense of unease. Strange sounds echoed through the corridors, footsteps where there should be none, faint laughter, and the whisper of voices that seemed to come from empty rooms. David, trying to ease his family's anxiety, chalked it up to an overactive imagination. "It's an old hotel, folks. Creaks and groans are to be expected." But as the night wore on, the disturbances grew more unsettling. Emily woke with a start, convinced that she had seen a shadowy figure at the foot of her bed. Danielle claimed that someone had whispered his name in the darkness, and Sarah had heard the unmistakable sound of a child's laughter. The following day, the Johnsons decided to explore the hotel's history, hoping to find an explanation for the unsettling occurrences. They discovered that the Marlowe Hotel had a dark past. A fire had claimed the lives of several guests in the early 1900s, including children who had perished in their sleep. Sarah couldn't help but shudder as she read the accounts of the tragic incident. "Do you think the spirits of those children still linger here?" she asked David. David was skeptical but willing to entertain the idea. Maybe they're just trying to communicate, to seek comfort in the living. As the days turned into nights, the Johnsons' encounters with the paranormal became more frequent and more chilling. Emily claimed that she had seen the apparition of a young boy, his eyes filled with sadness. Daniel insisted that his toys moved on their own, as if guided by invisible hands. One evening, as they gathered in their room, they heard the sound of children's laughter echoing through the corridor. It was unmistakably the laughter of young voices, carefree and innocent. But when they opened the door to investigate, the hallway was empty, the laughter fading into silence. The Johnsons began to feel like intruders in a world haunted by the past. They could no longer dismiss the supernatural occurrences as mere coincidence. The Marlowe Hotel held secrets that refused to remain buried. As they delved deeper into the hotel's history, they uncovered tales of guests who had vanished without a trace, of spectral figures who roamed the halls at night. The hotel's reputation as one of the most haunted places in the region seemed all too real. Fearful for their children's safety, Sarah and David made the difficult decision to cut their stay short and check out of the Marlowe Hotel. They couldn't bear to expose Emily and Daniel to the unsettling presence that lingered within its walls. But as they packed their bags and prepared to leave, a sudden chill settled over the room. The air grew heavy with a malevolent presence, and the temperature plummeted. The windows rattled, and the door slammed shut with a deafening bang. Trapped within the confines of the haunted hotel, the Johnsons realized that their escape might not be as easy as they had hoped. The spirits of the Marlowe Hotel had other plans, and they were determined to make their presence known. The Johnson family stood frozen in their dimly lit hotel room, the echoes of the slamming door still ringing in their ears. The air was icy, and the room seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. Their escape from the Marlowe Hotel had been abruptly halted, and they were now at the mercy of the restless spirits that dwelled within its walls. David, his voice trembling, tried to remain composed. "We need to find a way out of here. This place is not safe for us or the kids." Sarah, clutching Emily and Daniel close, nodded in agreement. "But how do we leave when the door won't open?" Desperation settled over them as they searched the room for any means of escape. It was then that Emily, her eyes filled with terror, pointed to a dusty old mirror on the wall. In its reflection, they could see the distorted figures of children, their faces contorted in anguish. The mirror seemed to ripple with an eerie energy, and the ghostly children reached out as if pleading for help. It was a chilling sight that sent shivers down their spines. As they watched in horror, the reflection in the mirror shifted, revealing a doorway that had not been there before. It beckoned to them like a portal to another realm. Without hesitation, they stepped through the mirror, entering a shadowy corridor that seemed to exist in a dimension beyond their understanding. The air was heavy with the presence of unseen entities, and the walls seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy. Their journey through the haunted hotel's hidden passages led them deeper into the heart of the supernatural. They encountered ghostly apparitions, each bearing the weight of their own tragic tales. There were the spirits of the guests who had perished in the fire, their ashen faces eternally frozen in terror. There were the children who had vanished without a trace, their laughter now replaced by mournful cries. The Johnsons' determination to escape grew stronger with each encounter, but the hotel's labyrinthine passages seemed endless. Time lost all meaning as they wandered through a nightmarish maze of shifting corridors and spectral visions. In their darkest moments, they encountered a figure, a woman dressed in tattered rags, her eyes vacant, and her face marked by the passage of time. She spoke in hushed whispers, recounting the history of the Marlowe Hotel and the countless souls it had ensnared. "The hotel is a prison for the lost and the restless," the woman whispered. "It feeds on their pain and traps them in its never-ending cycle of despair." Determined to break free, the Johnsons pressed on, driven by their love for one another and their will to survive. They knew that the spirits of the Marlowe Hotel were relentless, but they refused to become permanent residents of this haunted realm. As they ventured deeper into the heart of the supernatural, they discovered a hidden chamber, a place of darkness and sorrow, where the malevolent energy of the hotel converged. It was there that they would confront the source of the hotel's haunting. With trembling hearts, they entered the chamber, ready to face the entity that held them captive. The room pulsed with a malevolent energy, and the air grew thick with the weight of centuries of suffering. And there, in the center of the chamber, they saw it, an apparition of a sinister presence, a spectral figure with hollow eyes that seemed to pierce their souls. It was the embodiment of the Marlowe Hotel's malevolence, the source of the supernatural horrors that had ensnared them. As they prepared to confront the entity, the room filled with a deafening roar, and the spirits of the hotel manifested around them. The Johnsons knew that this was their final stand, their chance to break free from the haunted hotel's grasp. With determination and courage, they confronted the malevolent entity, their love for one another serving as a shield against its dark power. They called upon the spirits of the lost souls, urging them to find peace and release the hotel from its cursed existence. The room trembled, and the malevolent entity writhed in anguish as the spirits of the Marlowe Hotel began to dissipate, their energy returning to the eternal void. The hotel's dark history was unraveling, and the entity's power weakened with each passing moment. With a final deafening roar, the malevolent entity disintegrated into nothingness, and the chamber fell silent. The Johnsons stood victorious, their courage and love having broken the curse that had held the hotel captive for so long. As they left the haunted Marlowe Hotel, they knew that the spirits of the past had found their peace and that the hotel's reputation as one of the most haunted places in the region had finally come to an end. The Johnsons had faced the supernatural and emerged stronger, forever changed by their harrowing ordeal. The Johnson family emerged from the chamber of darkness within the Marlowe Hotel, their hearts still racing from their confrontation with the malevolent entity that had held the place in its grip. The once haunted hotel now stood silent and still, its oppressive energy lifted, and the spirits of the past finally finding their peace. As they made their way through the now quiet hallways, they couldn't help but feel a sense of relief mixed with sadness. They had encountered the supernatural, confronted their deepest fears, and emerged victorious. But they also knew that the Marlowe Hotel would forever bear the scars of its dark history. Upon reaching the lobby, they were met with a sight they hadn't expected. Mr. Turner, the stoic concierge, stood before them, his demeanor transformed from cold indifference to one of genuine warmth and gratitude. "You did it," he said with a genuine smile. "You've broken the curse that has plagued this place for so long. The spirits can finally rest, and the Marlowe Hotel can begin anew." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes as she realized the weight of their accomplishment. "But what about the guests who stayed here? Are they safe now?" Mr. Turner nodded. "The guests who became trapped within the supernatural realm have been freed, and the hotel's dark history is no more. It is a new beginning for the Marlowe Hotel." As they bid farewell to the once haunted hotel, the Johnsons couldn't help but reflect on the profound journey they had undertaken. They had not only confronted the supernatural, but had also discovered the resilience of the human spirit in the face of darkness. Their drive away from the Marlowe Hotel was marked by a sense of closure and renewal. They knew that they would carry the memory of their harrowing ordeal with them always, a reminder of the mysteries of the supernatural world and the power of love and courage to overcome even the darkest of forces. The Marlowe Hotel, now free from its haunted past, stood as a beacon of hope, ready to welcome new guests with its elegant charm and a history forever changed.